What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about sleep was fundamentally incomplete? You have been told your entire life that sleep is rest, that it is a passive state where your body simply powers down like a computer going into standby mode. But here is the truth that neuroscientists have only recently discovered, and it changes everything about how you should think about your morning meal. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is a cleaning cycle. And what you eat when you wake up determines whether that cleaning cycle was truly finished, or whether you are walking around all day with a brain that never got properly washed. Let me explain what I mean by that, because this is not some metaphor or poetic language. This is hard biology. In 2012, researchers at the University of Rochester Medical Center, led by Dr. Macon Nittergaard, made a discovery that rewrote our understanding of the human brain. Their findings, published in Science Translational Medicine, revealed an entirely new system in the brain called the glymphatic system, and its sole purpose is waste removal. You see, your brain is the most metabolically active organ in your entire body. It consumes about 20% of all the energy you take in, even though it only represents about 2% of your body weight. And just like any factory that runs at full capacity all day, your brain produces waste, metabolic byproducts, cellular debris. And most concerning of all, proteins like beta amyloid and tau, which are the very same sticky plaques associated with cognitive decline in older adults. During your waking hours, this waste accumulates. It builds up between your brain cells like trash collecting on the streets of a city. But when you sleep, something remarkable happens. A follow-up study published in the journal Science in 2013 by Zai and colleagues at the same research center demonstrated that the fluid-filled channels between your brain cells actually expand by about 60% during sleep. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to rush through your brain like a pressure washer, flushing all that accumulated debris out through channels that run alongside your blood vessels. The glymphatic system does the vast majority of its work during deep sleep. This is why poor sleep is so strongly associated with cognitive challenges later in life. It is not just that you are tired. It is that your brain never got cleaned. But here is the part nobody talks about. Your body is still managing that waste load when you wake up. While the active pressure washing happens while you sleep, the waste products that were flushed out of your brain tissue are now in circulation, waiting to be eliminated. The foods you choose at breakfast can either provide the molecular tools your body needs to complete this elimination process and begin rebuilding, or they can introduce a flood of inflammatory compounds, oxidative stress, and blood sugar spikes that essentially throw sand into the gears. This is why I created this video, because after decades of research into longevity, nutrition, and brain health, I have come to understand that breakfast is not just another meal. It is a metabolic intervention. It is a daily opportunity to support your brain's natural repair mechanisms, to provide the building blocks your neurons need to maintain their structure and function, and to protect the delicate cellular machinery that keeps your memories sharp and your thinking clear. And today, I am going to share with you the 5 breakfast foods that are most powerfully associated with supporting brain health, backed by peer-reviewed research, and explained in a way that will change how you think about your morning routine forever. Before we dive into the countdown, I want to know who I am talking to today. Pause for a second and comment below with your age and which city you are watching from. It helps me create better videos for you. And honestly, it helps this community grow so we can support each other on this journey toward longer, healthier, sharper lives. Now, let us begin our countdown at number 5, and I want to take you back in time before I even tell you what this food is. Picture the Scottish Highlands in the 18th century. The mist is rolling off the mountains, the air is cold, and farmers are waking up before dawn to tend their fields. They did not have access to fancy nutrition science. They did not know about blood sugar or glycemic index or neurotransmitter precursors, but they knew one thing from generations of lived experience. If they started their morning with a specific grain, slow-cooked over a low fire, they could work the fields for hours without fatigue, without the mental fog that came from other breakfast options. That grain, of course, was oats, and the preparation method they used, which we now call steel-cut oats, turns out to be one of the most brain-supportive breakfast options modern science has validated. Here is why. Your brain runs primarily on glucose. It is the preferred fuel source for your neurons. But here is the critical distinction that most people miss. Your brain does not just need glucose, it needs stable glucose. When your blood sugar spikes rapidly, as it does after eating refined carbohydrates or sugary breakfast foods, you get a temporary surge of energy followed by a crash. and during that crash, your brain is essentially running on fumes. Cognitive performance drops. Word recall becomes difficult. That foggy, sluggish feeling sets in. This is not just about feeling tired. A landmark study published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2013 by Crane and colleagues analyzed data from over 2,000 participants over nearly 7 years. The researchers found that higher glucose levels, even in individuals without diabetes, were associated with increased risk of cognitive decline. The relationship was linear, meaning that even modest elevations in blood sugar over time were associated with measurable effects on brain health. Steel-cut oats are fundamentally different from instant oatmeal or quick oats because the processing method preserves the structural integrity of the grain. The beta-glucan fiber in steel-cut oats forms a gel-like substance in your digestive tract that dramatically slows the absorption of sugars into your bloodstream. A systematic review published in the British Journal of Nutrition in 2015 by Tosh and Chu examined multiple studies on oat processing and glycemic response. The researchers confirmed that less processed oat products, like steel-cut oats, produce significantly lower blood glucose responses compared to more processed forms like instant oatmeal, even when the total carbohydrate content was identical. This sustained energy release means your brain receives a steady supply of fuel throughout the morning rather than a roller coaster of peaks and valleys. But there is another mechanism at work here that most people do not know about, and it has to do with the gut-brain connection. The beta-glucan in oats acts as a prebiotic, meaning it feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly one called butyrate, which research has shown can influence brain function through the gut-brain axis. While the exact mechanisms are still being studied, there is growing evidence that a healthy gut microbiome supports the production of compounds that may help maintain healthy brain function and reduce neuroinflammation. Let me tell you about Robert. Robert is a 72-year-old retired engineer from Minneapolis who came to me frustrated because he was having trouble concentrating on his woodworking projects, a hobby he had loved for 40 years. He described a mental haziness that would settle in around 10 in the morning, right when he used to be at his sharpest. When I asked about his breakfast habits, he told me he had been eating a sugary granola bar and a glass of orange juice every morning for years because it was quick and convenient. We made one change. He switched to a bowl of steel-cut oats, prepared the night before in a slow cooker, topped with a few walnuts and some cinnamon. Within 3 weeks, Robert told me the 10 o'clock fog had lifted. He was completing projects he had abandoned months earlier. Now, I cannot tell you that oatmeal cured anything because that is not how nutrition works. But what I can tell you is that by stabilizing his blood sugar and providing his brain with steady fuel, we removed an obstacle that had been interfering with his natural cognitive function. The best way to prepare steel-cut oats for maximum benefit is low and slow. Cooking them overnight in a slow cooker on low heat preserves more of the beta-glucan structure compared to rapid boiling. Add a tablespoon of coconut oil or grass-fed butter when serving because the healthy fats slow gastric emptying even further and help with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. A sprinkle of cinnamon is not just for flavor. Some preliminary research suggests it may help support healthy blood sugar response as well. This brings us to number 4 on our countdown, and for this one I need to take you to a very different place in time. Imagine rural China, 2,000 years ago. Healers and physicians in this ancient civilization believed that certain foods carried the essence of the organs they resembled, and there was one food they associated with longevity and mental acuity. It was oval, contained within a protective shell, and inside held a golden center surrounded by a translucent white. Of course, I am talking about the humble egg. Now, the ancient reasoning about food resemblance was obviously not scientific, but in a twist that feels almost poetic, modern research has vindicated the egg as one of the most neurologically supportive foods we can consume. The star compound in eggs when it comes to brain health is choline. Your brain uses choline to produce acetylcholine, which is one of the most important neurotransmitters for memory formation and recall. Acetylcholine is so critical for cognitive function that many pharmaceutical approaches to supporting brain health work by preventing the breakdown of this specific neurotransmitter. But here is what makes dietary choline so fascinating. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2011 by Polly and colleagues examined data from the Framingham offspring study, following nearly 1,500 adults over time. The researchers found that higher choline intake was significantly associated with better performance on verbal memory and visual memory tests. Perhaps equally important, higher choline intake was associated with a lower likelihood of white matter hyperintensity, which are small areas of damage in the brain often associated with aging. The majority of the choline in eggs is found in the yolk, which is why the decades-long advice to eat only egg whites was so misguided from a brain health perspective. A single large egg yolk contains approximately 147 milligrams of choline, which is about 27% of the adequate intake for adult men and 37% for adult women. But choline is just the beginning. Egg yolks are also one of the best dietary sources of two carotenoids called lutein and zeaxanthin. You may have heard of these in the context of eye health, but research from the Jean Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University has explored their role in brain health as well. Dr. Elizabeth Johnson and her colleagues have published research showing that these carotenoids accumulate in brain tissue and may support cognitive function in older adults. The biological mechanism here is genuinely elegant. Lutein and zeaxanthin are potent antioxidants that accumulate in neural tissue, where they help protect cell membranes from oxidative damage. Your brain is particularly vulnerable to oxidation because of its high metabolic activity and high concentration of polyunsaturated fats. These carotenoids essentially act as a protective shield for your neurons, and the bioavailability from eggs is remarkably high because of the fat content in the yolk. I want to tell you about Alina. Alina is a 68-year-old former librarian from Portland, Oregon, who had started to struggle with what she called her word-finding problem. She knew the word she wanted to say. She could picture the concept perfectly, but the word itself seemed to hover just out of reach, sometimes for several seconds, sometimes longer. This is an incredibly common experience as we age, and while it is usually nothing to be alarmed about, it was bothering Alina deeply. It made her less confident in conversations. She started avoiding social situations because she felt embarrassed. When we discussed her diet, I learned that Alina had been avoiding eggs for over a decade because of outdated concerns about cholesterol. We worked together with her healthcare provider to reintroduce whole eggs into her breakfast routine, and over several months, Alina reported feeling sharper during conversations. She said the words seemed to come more readily. Again, I want to be clear that I am not claiming eggs fixed her word recall issues. What I am suggesting is that by providing her brain with adequate choline and protective antioxidants, we may have supported the underlying neural mechanisms that facilitate language retrieval. To maximize the benefits of eggs, cooking method matters more than you might think. High-heat cooking can damage some of the delicate nutrients in the yolk, particularly the omega-3 fatty acids found in pasture-raised eggs. Poaching or soft boiling preserves the most nutrition. If you prefer scrambled eggs, cook them over medium-low heat and remove them from the pan while they are still slightly soft. And please, if you can access them, choose pasture-raised eggs from hens that forage on grass and insects. Research shows these eggs contain significantly higher levels of omega-3s and vitamins compared to conventional eggs. But even more powerful than that is our next contender, and this one has a rather remarkable history that spans multiple continents and thousands of years. Number 3 on our countdown is a food that ancient Persians called the royal nut, that was traded along the Silk Road as a precious commodity, and that turns out to have one of the most impressive neurological profiles of any food we can eat. I am speaking of the walnut, and what makes this nut particularly fascinating is that it actually looks like a miniature brain, complete with two hemispheres, folds resembling the cerebral cortex, and a protective shell that mirrors the skull. Unlike most other nuts, walnuts are the only tree nut that contains a significant amount of alpha-linolenic acid, the plant-based omega-3 fatty acid. A 1-ounce serving, which is about 14 walnut halves, provides 2.5 grams of ALA. Now, it is true that ALA must be converted to the longer-chain omega-3s DHA and EPA for optimal brain utilization, and this conversion is relatively inefficient in humans. But walnuts also contain a complex matrix of polyphenolic compounds, including L-argitinins and their metabolites called urolithins, which appear to offer neuroprotective benefits through entirely different pathways. A landmark cross-sectional study published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging in 2015 by Arab and Ang analyzed data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, examining over 17,000 participants across multiple age groups. The researchers found a striking and consistent correlation. Those who consumed walnuts performed significantly better on cognitive tests, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, or body mass index. The researchers controlled for multiple confounding variables including education, smoking status, and overall diet quality, and still found this robust association. Walnut consumers scored higher on measures of memory, concentration, and information processing speed. The relationship held across all adult age groups but was particularly notable in older adults. The mechanism goes beyond simple omega-3 content. Walnuts contain compounds that may help reduce oxidative stress and inflammation in neural tissue. A study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2014 by Mudya and colleagues examined walnut supplementation in animal models. The researchers found that dietary walnut supplementation was associated with improvements in learning skills, memory, and motor coordination. The researchers attributed these effects to the combined action of the omega-3s, polyphenols, and antioxidant compounds found in walnuts. Let me introduce you to Thomas. Thomas is a 74-year-old former accountant from Charlotte, North Carolina, and his concern was not so much memory loss as it was mental speed. He described feeling like his brain was processing things more slowly than it used to, like there was a slight delay between receiving information and understanding it. This is sometimes called processing speed, and it is one of the cognitive domains that tends to decline with age. Thomas started incorporating a handful of walnuts into his morning routine, usually sprinkled over his oatmeal, which gave him the combined benefits of both foods. Over time, Thomas reported feeling quicker mentally. He found himself finishing crossword puzzles faster. He was keeping up better in fast-paced conversations with his grandchildren. Did walnuts cause these improvements? I cannot make that claim. But the research certainly supports the idea that the compounds in walnuts may help maintain the neural pathways involved in processing speed. To get the most from your walnuts, storage matters enormously. The delicate omega-3 oils in walnuts are prone to oxidation, which is why walnuts can taste bitter when they go stale. Store them in an airtight container in the refrigerator or even the freezer to preserve their nutritional profile. Buy them in smaller quantities and use them within a few months. Raw walnuts are preferable to roasted because high-temperature roasting can damage the omega-3s, though a light, low-temperature roast is generally fine. And never buy walnuts that taste bitter or smell off because that bitterness indicates oxidation. This brings us to number 2 on our countdown, and I must confess a personal affection for this food because it represents one of the most compelling bodies of research in all of nutritional neuroscience. To set the stage, I want to take you to the bogs and forests of North America, where indigenous peoples have harvested this fruit for thousands of years. They used it for food, for medicine, and for dye. European settlers initially dismissed it, but the scientific community has now come to recognize this small, unassuming fruit as a genuine powerhouse for brain health. I am talking about the blueberry, and specifically the class of compounds it contains called anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are the pigments responsible for the deep blue and purple colors in blueberries, but they are far more than just pigments. They are among the most potent antioxidants found in nature, and what makes them especially remarkable for brain health is their ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is an extremely selective membrane that prevents most substances in the bloodstream from entering brain tissue. This is a protective mechanism, but it also makes it challenging to deliver beneficial compounds directly to the brain. Research has demonstrated that anthocyanins, particularly the specific types found in blueberries, can cross this barrier and accumulate in regions of the brain associated with memory and learning. A seminal study published in the Annals of Neurology in 2012 by DeVore and colleagues, part of the Harvard Nurses' Health Study, followed over 16,000 women for an average of nearly 6 years. The researchers found that participants who consumed 2 or more servings of blueberries or strawberries per week showed significantly slower rates of cognitive decline compared to those who rarely ate berries. The researchers calculated that the high berry consumers showed cognitive aging that was delayed by up to 2.5 years compared to low consumers. 2.5 years of preserved mental clarity associated with simply eating berries regularly. The study controlled for multiple factors including age, education, physical activity, and overall diet quality. The mechanisms are multiple and synergistic. Anthocyanins have been shown in laboratory research to reduce oxidative stress in neural tissue, to decrease markers of neuroinflammation, and perhaps most excitingly, to enhance signaling between neurons. A study published in Applied Physiology, Nutrition, and Metabolism in 2017 by Bodell and colleagues examined older adults who consumed concentrated blueberry juice daily for 12 weeks. Using functional MRI scanning, the researchers observed that blueberry consumers showed increased brain activation in regions associated with working memory during cognitive tasks, suggesting improved efficiency of neural processing. There's also fascinating research on blueberries and BDNF, that brain-derived neurotrophic factor I mentioned earlier. Animal studies have shown that blueberry supplementation is associated with increased BDNF expression in the hippocampus, which is the primary memory center of the brain. Higher BDNF levels are associated with improved synaptic plasticity, meaning the brain's ability to form new connections and adapt to new information. I want to share the story of Helen. Helen is a 69-year-old retired nurse from Seattle who had noticed what she described as a mental cloudiness that seemed to settle in during the afternoon. She would struggle to remember why she had walked into a room. She would lose track of conversations. It was subtle, but it was persistent, and it frightened her because she had spent her career caring for patients with serious cognitive conditions. Helen started having a cup of fresh blueberries every morning with her breakfast, and she was diligent about it, rarely missing a day for over a year. The last time we spoke, Helen told me that the afternoon fog had lifted substantially. She felt clearer, more present, more like herself. She could not be certain the blueberries were responsible, but she had made no other significant changes to her routine. The timing certainly suggested a connection. To maximize the brain-boosting potential of blueberries, freshness and quality matter. Wild blueberries, which are smaller than the cultivated varieties, have been shown to contain higher anthocyanin concentrations per serving. Frozen blueberries are an excellent option because they are typically frozen shortly after harvest, preserving their nutritional content. In fact, some research suggests that the cell damage from freezing may actually increase the bioavailability of certain compounds by breaking down cell walls. Avoid blueberry products with added sugars, and if you are using dried blueberries, look for options without added sweeteners. Pairing blueberries with a source of fat, such as full-fat yogurt or a handful of nuts, may enhance the absorption of their fat-soluble compounds. And now, at last, we have reached number 1. The food I am about to reveal sits at the absolute pinnacle of brain nutrition research. It contains the single most critical nutrient for brain structure and function, a compound that your body cannot produce efficiently on its own and must obtain from diet. Virtually every major study on diet and cognitive health has identified this food, or its key nutrient, as protective. I want to bring you to the cold, pristine waters off the coast of Alaska, where wild salmon fight their way upstream against rushing currents, building muscle mass and accumulating nutrients from the marine food chain. These fish are swimming repositories of docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, the omega-3 fatty acid that quite literally forms the structural foundation of your brain. Here is a fact that I find almost startling. Approximately 60% of your brain by dry weight is fat, and of that fat, the most abundant essential fatty acid is DHA. It is concentrated in the membranes of your neurons, where it influences membrane fluidity, receptor function, and cell signaling. Without adequate DHA, your brain cells cannot communicate effectively. The membranes become rigid. The receptors do not work as efficiently. Neurotransmission slows down. The Framingham Heart Study, one of the longest-running epidemiological studies in history, has provided compelling data on this relationship. Research published from this study in the journal Neurology in 2012 by Tan and colleagues examined over 1,000 participants who were free of clinical cognitive impairment at baseline. The researchers measured red blood cell, omega-3 fatty acid levels, and then followed participants with brain MRI scans and cognitive testing. The findings were remarkable. Participants in the lowest quartile of DHA levels had significantly smaller total brain volumes and scored lower on tests of visual memory, executive function, and abstract thinking, compared to those with higher DHA levels. The researchers noted that low omega-3 status was associated with accelerated brain aging. But DHA is not the only brain-supportive compound in fatty fish like salmon. These fish also contain icosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, which is a potent anti-inflammatory omega-3. Neuroinflammation is increasingly recognized as a central factor in age-related cognitive changes. EPA helps regulate the inflammatory response in neural tissue, potentially protecting against the chronic low-grade inflammation that accumulates over decades. Salmon also contains astaxanthin, the carotenoid that gives the fish its characteristic pink color. Astaxanthin is one of the most powerful antioxidants known to science, with research suggesting it is particularly effective at neutralizing free radicals in lipid-rich environments like brain cell membranes. A randomized controlled trial published in Cerebral Cortex in 2014 by Witt and colleagues examined the effects of omega-3 supplementation on brain structure in healthy older adults. After 26 weeks, participants receiving omega-3s showed improvements in executive function, and notably, increases in gray matter volume in brain regions associated with learning and memory. The researchers suggested that omega-3 fatty acids may support the maintenance of brain structure during aging through multiple mechanisms, including reduced inflammation and improved cell membrane function. Now I want to tell you about Raymond, and I share his story because it captures so perfectly why I am so passionate about this topic. Raymond is a 76-year-old retired jazz musician from New Orleans who had noticed changes in his memory that genuinely scared him. He would forget the names of songs he had played hundreds of times. He would get confused about the sequence of events from his past. His wife noticed it too, and she was worried. Raymond's physician ran tests and found nothing alarming, but recommended dietary modifications as a supportive measure. We worked together to incorporate wild-caught salmon into his breakfast routine 3 times per week, usually as smoked salmon with eggs or as leftover baked salmon from dinner the night before. Raymond was skeptical at first because salmon for breakfast felt strange to him, but within a few months, he began noticing subtle shifts. The song titles came back more easily. The memories felt less fragmented. His wife confirmed that he seemed sharper during their conversations. Raymond told me, and I will never forget his words, that he felt like he was returning to himself. That is not a clinical outcome. It is not something I can quantify or prove, but to Raymond, it was everything. To maximize the brain benefits of fatty fish, wild-caught is clearly preferable to farmed. Wild salmon has a more favorable omega-3 to omega-6 ratio and typically contains fewer environmental contaminants. Sockeye salmon is particularly rich in astaxanthin due to its diet of krill and other crustaceans. Cooking method matters here as well. Baking or poaching at moderate temperatures preserves more of the delicate omega-3 oils compared to high-heat frying or grilling, which can oxidize these fragile fats. Smoked salmon is convenient for breakfast and retains most of its nutritional value, though be mindful of sodium content if that is a concern for you. Sardines and mackerel are also excellent options that are often more affordable and more sustainable than salmon, while providing similar omega-3 benefits. So there you have it. 5 breakfast foods, each backed by real, verifiable peer-reviewed research, each working through distinct and complementary mechanisms to support the magnificent organ that makes you who you are. But I want to leave you with something more important than a list of foods. I want to leave you with a philosophy, a way of thinking about your relationship with food that goes beyond any single meal. The concept of food as medicine is not new. It stretches back to Hippocrates, to ancient Chinese physicians, to indigenous healers across every continent. But somewhere along the way, modern society separated food from health. We began treating meals as mere fuel or, worse, as sources of convenience and pleasure divorced from their biological effects. What I hope you take from this video is a reunification of these concepts. Every bite you take is communication. It is a message to your cells, your neurons, your genes. And the message you send at breakfast, during that critical window when your brain is waking up and dealing with its nightly metabolic work, matters enormously. This does not mean you need to be perfect. Perfection is the enemy of progress, especially when it comes to long-term health. You will have mornings when steel-cut oats are too much trouble, when you reach for something quick and processed, when life simply gets in the way. That is fine. That is human. What matters is the pattern, the consistent direction of your choices over weeks and months and years. One healthy breakfast will not transform your brain, but 1,000 of them might. I also want to acknowledge something that often goes unsaid in videos like this one. Food is not the whole story. Sleep quality, physical activity, social connection, mental stimulation, stress management, these all play crucial roles in brain health. The breakfast foods I have shared today are powerful tools, but they work best as part of a comprehensive approach to longevity. Think of them as one pillar in a larger structure that you are building day by day. Finally, I want to speak directly to those of you watching who are scared. Maybe you have noticed changes in your thinking. Maybe you have watched a parent or grandparent struggle with their memory. Maybe you feel a quiet dread when you forget a word or lose your train of thought. I see you. I understand. And I want you to know that taking action, any action, is profoundly meaningful. By watching this video, by caring enough to seek out information, by considering changes to your morning routine, you are already doing something valuable. You are not passive. You are not resigned. You are fighting in the best possible way for your own future. Tomorrow morning, when the light comes through your window and you make your way to the kitchen, I hope you will think about what your brain has been doing all night. I hope you will picture that glymphatic system, flushing waste, clearing the pathways. And I hope you will choose to greet the day with foods that honor the extraordinary organ that houses your memories, your personality, your very essence. You deserve that. Your brain deserves that. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video helped you, please share it with someone you love. Subscribe if you want more content like this, and remember, it is never too late to start taking care of yourself. Until next time, be well.